Hello. Hello, good afternoon. Everything okay? You can hear? Can you hear? Thank you. Okay, so I think we are discussing. Okay, recording is on already. So anybody has any question or anything to say before we start today's class? Okay, so if not, then let us discuss the two-level problem. Some general conclusion, some general features of part by means of a very simple system where you have only two levels. Okay, so I think we worked out this expression. So this, no, I should write the general expression. So this was the general expression when the diagonal elements were zero. That means in case you have forgotten or missed, so the H11 is equal to 1 H0 plus what symbol? Yes. So we have written, so this one is E1, 1, 1, and this is 1 H1, 1. Okay. And we have said that this guy is 0. Similarly, H12 is 1 H0 plus H2, sorry, H1, 2. And we can see that H0, so this will be 2, 1, 2 plus H1 to 1. So that means H1 to 1. Similarly, the H21 and H22s can also be written. So we have only assumed that H111 is equal to H221 is equal to 0, and also H121 is equal to H211. That's all we have. So your epsilon is actually epsilon square is equal to that's all. So in the special case, I think I told you that if your epsilon is 0, you have already proved in the previous class that E plus actually E1, E minus actually equal to E2. So, and so E1 and E2, what are E1 and E2? E1 and E2 are the two unperturbed states. That means psi 1 0, psi 2 0. Okay. Let us see what it means. This result is very interesting, and this is applied. This is applicable to many systems, many places. This is a general feature of perturbation theory, actually, which we can understand from this little picture. So this is your, let us see, this is your energy, and this side is, so this is the difference. Okay. It is better to write in the middle, because we have to write a few things. So these are the two unperturbed energies, E1 and E2. Okay? What it is meaning that as you go from this side to this side, the difference between the two unperturbed states, energies actually is increasing. Now what happens is that you are applying the perturbation. So the whole problem is to find out how these two states are influenced when the perturbation is switched on. That is the whole problem. So what we see from this is your delta E. Okay, so from small delta E to this is becoming large delta E. Okay, and we see that I cannot draw properly, but you should understand what is going on. This is one thing. And then we should draw another stuff. So this one we'll discuss later, but what is this means? What are these? What is the meaning of this? That means is that if you just look at the raw expression, E plus A minus E minus. So these are your, actually these dotted lines are E plus A minus, E plus and E minus. E plus and E minus is actually the perturbed energies. Okay, how is it deviating from E1 and E2? Right, this state is actually becoming this after the perturbation. This state is happening like this. So this is the first order correction you have used, right, these expressions, and we are going to do this second order little bit later, but let us understand the meaning of this line. What it means, you can see very interesting stuff, and this is a very important general feature of perturbation theory in everywhere. What it means is that in the small energy difference, that means when the two unperturbed levels are close to each other, the effect of perturbation is more. You see that? When the two levels are close in energy, E1 and E2 or E2 and E1, whichever, your impact of perturbation, that means these states, these two unperturbed states are influenced by the perturbation in perturbation theory to become like this in energy. So you can see that here in this region, the impact of perturbation is much higher than in the high delta E region. That means when the energy separation is larger, the impact of perturbation is smaller than when the energy difference is lower. This is a very interesting aspect. And another stuff is that the lower state of these two unperturbed energies actually become lower by the perturbation theory. And the higher states go higher in the energy. That means what? That means there is no chance that these two perturbed energy states will ever cross each other. So this is a non-crossing rule. That means the two states are never going to cross each other, right? The lower state will become lower in energy and the higher state will become higher in energy, so that there is no chance of crossing each other. The third observation is that, of course, it is natural when your perturbation is stronger. That means the energy, perturbation is controlled by these two parameters, H121 or H211. These are the parameters through which perturbation will enter into the picture. So when epsilon is larger, means stronger perturbation is applied, no wonder your influence in the energy will be much higher. That is a very simple observation, but these two are very interesting observations that you should see. Okay, so I think in many places in chemistry you have actually encountered the so-called non-crossing rule. And you can prove that even more easily, very interestingly. So what happens when, so you see this, when the energy separation between the two states becomes very smaller, and then I can actually take a case of two states when they are actually degenerate. So I asked to do this exercise. You find out what happens to these two energies, E plus and E minus, when your E1 is equal to E2. Please do this exercise. That means you are asking for the, what about this? The two states are actually the two level system, but the two states are actually degenerate. That actually is encountered in many problems in physics and chemistry. And you see, because when you have spectroscopy in molecules and atoms, you will have actually lot of degenerate states, right? So see what happens to the perturbation theory when you have two states who are degenerate. So please work this exercise out and just tell me what happens to E plus and E minus. Okay, see what happens when in this expression E1 is equal to E2. So just do this. What happens to E plus and what happens to E minus? Tell me. Then we will see, right? So please do and write in the chat box or just tell me. So that means at that point, I will see that what will happen to if the energy difference is becoming smaller and smaller, eventually the two states are degenerate. Right? So please do this. What will happen? E plus should become E minus and E plus will be same. BE plus. What is BE plus? What is BE star? E plus and E minus will be same. Are you sure, Adrija? What about others? E plus is equal to E1 plus epsilon. That's great. And what about E minus? E minus equal to E1 minus epsilon. That's right. Right? Sorry. Suranjana says E minus is equal to E1 minus epsilon. That's right. Okay. So Adrija, you see you had some, you must have gooped up somewhere. So they are not same, but the expressions which is given by this Tahiti and Suranjana, that is correct. So what it means? So what is the meaning of this? Now who can say this? Of course the meaning is very clear. So what is E plus and E minus? Remember what is E plus and E minus now? That means I had two states which were degenerate. Now you have applied a perturbation theory. Remember there is a whole thing called degenerate perturbation theory that we are not going to study. But through this little two-level problem, you can have a sense of what is degenerate perturbation theory going to be. We are not going to the details, but in this little exercise, you can actually prove that for these two states which are degenerate, what is the impact of perturbation? So that means if you had E1 and E2, which are same, E1 equal to E2, so one of them becomes E1 plus epsilon, right? And the other becomes E1 minus epsilon. So what is the separation? Separation in energy is actually twice epsilon, right? So the separation in the, right? So these levels will become like this in the perturbation expansion. Okay, so that's what, and you will see that that is actually the maximum. That is actually the maximum that can happen in this scenario, because you look at this expression, you sorry. So you will look at this. So this is the maximum amount of perturbation influence that can happen when the two states are actually degenerate. Now just keep this in mind, and we will work out one little exercise, then go to that picture again. So now let us derive the general case where, so remember in the perturbation theory expressions, what you have worked, you have always assumed that the perturbation is not very strong. You have always assumed that. What is the implication? Implication is that perturbation is, most of the perturbation theory problems actually give good results when perturbation is not very strong. Okay. So, and there are many problems in physics and chemistry where perturbation theory breaks down. And the today's femtochemistry and atochemistry, you must have heard, in those problems actually, as far as theory is concerned, perturbation theory breaks down. There are reasons why. There are regions in the electromagnetic spectrum where perturbation theory actually fails. So it is very common in physics and chemistry problems. But there are many problems where perturbation theory actually offers good results, right? So in those cases, we say it is a weak perturbation, or perturbation in the sense, so what is that is the physical meaning. But what is the mathematical sense? Mathematical sense is that, remember, expanded the wave function and the energy in terms of the series E0 plus E1, plus E2 plus, when, so you have actually a lambda all the time, lambda square, lambda cube, etc., etc. So you have assumed that for only few terms in the series expansion, that means only few terms, maybe first order correction, or maybe second order correction, up to generally two or three third order corrections, your series actually will converge. That is what is the implied assumption in the perturbation theory. That means you want to consider only a few terms and hope that for these much corrections, 1, 2, 3, etc., not more than 3, because it becomes very difficult in your life, that series will converge, so that you can say that this is my correct energy. So, what is the meaning of that in this expression? In this expression, we want to assume that epsilon square is actually less than E1 minus E2 square. If this is the case, what will happen to this term again? This is my general expression. Can you please work it out? In this limit, what happens to E1 and, sorry, E plus and E minus? Please work it out. Very simple, just work it out. So don't wait for me to do. So what you can do is that half E1 plus E2 plus a minus half, you can write this guy as E1 minus E2 over E1 minus E2 into E1 minus E2 square plus 4 epsilon square. Right? Of course, there is a square root. Okay? And then what you can do is that you can take this guy inside. Okay? Then you can do what is that you can actually you can break this into two pieces. One plus okay, you can do that. Okay, so then what you can do is that half E1 plus E2 plus or minus, sorry, half E1 minus E2, right, into, so we can write it here. So 1 plus x root over half, right? We can use the binomial expansion. So what happens? 1 plus half x. Remember, 1 plus x half. So 1 plus half x, right? So where, so for epsilon, you can actually write, so 1 plus half x plus half into half minus 1 over 2 factorial x square, that kind of stuff, right? So we can retain only the first term, first power of x, and just ignore these guys to write this. So you can now do this business too, right? So what happens eventually? So 1 plus 2 epsilon square by epsilon minus epsilon, epsilon minus epsilon, sorry, epsilon 2 square, right? So you just work it out now. So this you will see that E1 plus epsilon square over epsilon minus epsilon 2. You just work it out, this little exercise. And then I will write it minus E2 minus E1, because that is the standard, because you have assumed that E1 is right. I want to write it in this form. So this is the plus one. So there are two signs. The plus, if you take this plus, you will get this. And minus will give you E2 plus epsilon square over delta E. And this is precisely what we have shown here. So this guy is actually the epsilon square over delta E plus and minus epsilon square over delta E. In fact, if you recall now your second order correction to the energy, you will always see there was things like this in the denominator. Recall, if you recall your perturbation theory second order derivation, you will see things like that. Okay, so that means I can draw this little picture. Okay, so this is my epsilon square over delta epsilon. Okay, and in the inside, I saw this. So this is the degenerate case. Okay. So these, remember, these features are general things in perturbation theory. Don't think that we actually did not assume anything about anybody except the fact of how is the interaction. Only one assumption was made, which was that diagonal elements are 0, H111, H221. Only we assume to be 0, but the rest, the perturbation H121, H211, we actually used as a measure of perturbation or epsilon. I think there are many things in perturbation theory that one can do, but I think I will leave perturbation theory here, and with the understanding that the degenerate perturbation theory and time-dependent perturbation theory you will read in your book, because we simply do not have time to cover that. If there is any question or any comments on perturbation theory, I have put some questions for you to work out, and then we'll move to something else now. Any question, comments, concerns, suggestions? कुछ तो है बोलो, कुछ है तो बोलो. Yes.
Sir, for the helium atom, that one. When we were considering the perturbed, like, like we were like multiplying the uh, wave functions for both the electrons to get the uh, wave function for the system of two electrons. But I was asking, like, why are we doing that? Why are we not like adding the wave function?
Wave functions, why we are not adding?
Yeah, like because the energies we were adding. So why
Hmm.
were we adding the wave function? I think this is very silly, but I just
No, 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 no. Okay, okay, okay. That's a that's a very interesting question. There is nothing silly in quantum mechanics, you know. Everybody becomes silly in face of quantum mechanics. Even Professor Einstein said that nobody understands quantum mechanics. So you cannot be more silly than that. So, okay, so I think everybody understands the question. She is asking, of course, when you are, but this question has nothing to do with your perturbation theory problem. It is simply because in the perturbation theory, we used this for the unperturbed problem, right? This concept was used for the unperturbed wave function, right? You wrote that electron 1 has a Hamiltonian, electron 2 has a Hamiltonian. Okay, so it's a very general question that you have asked, right? Is that correct, Adrija? Or
yes,
whoever asked?
sir. Yes,
So it is a very general question you have asked. Let us see how we can, let me see if I can answer these questions correctly. So what you are asking is that, okay, we have two particles, right? Of course, this question has no meaning if you do not have more than two things, more than one things, right? We have two things. So C says that why the function of this composite system is written phi. So suppose for this guy I write phi 1 1. This 1 2's you have to be careful. This one, so let us not write f1. Let us give another general thing is called f. So function of one particle, function of the second particle. Her question is that why I am not writing this as f1 plus f2. यही क्वेश्चन है ना तुम्हारा?
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, let us see if your friends are smarter than you. If anybody wishes to answer this question. Who will answer this question? It's a very simple question that should come to everybody's mind. Anybody wants to answer? Bolo, Tahiti, you answer? Rohan. It's a very interesting question, simple question, but you see that it's not at all a bad question. Who will answer? Nobody wants to answer. Okay. Rohan, कुछ तो comments pass करो. Make the class little bit interesting, you know. Surbhi, you have some thoughts?
Sir, when we apply the Hamiltonian on the wave function and we
Mm-hmm.
get E, then we have to get E for both of them separately. So in that case, because the wave function 1 and 2 are orthonormal, then it would
Oh,
be
no, that is too much. Why you have to say all these things? Bolo, bolo, bolo. You are saying a lot of things. Just say.
no, sir, that's the only train of thought I had.
What is your connection with the Hamiltonian? Let me understand if I get you correctly. You said something about the Hamiltonian, right?
Yes, sir. So when we apply the Hamiltonian on the wave function,
What is the
we
Hamiltonian? That is very important. Pointer to the answer. What is the Hamiltonian of this problem? Which one is first? The chicken or the egg? First is Hamiltonian or the wave function? Which one is first? Should be which one is first? Hamiltonian or the wave function?
Hamiltonian.
Why it takes such a long time? It's almost like asking your name, right?
Yes, sir.
Does it take so much time?
No, sir.
Of course, your Hamiltonian is first. The first is the definition, right? How you see the things. Wave function is to find out properties of the system, right? But
Yes,
you
sir.
can begin with the Hamiltonian. So first thing is the Hamiltonian, right? So let us dig at the Hamiltonian. That's, you may not have said everything properly, but I think what your answer has given is that we should look at the Hamiltonian. That's actually a good pointer. So what is the Hamiltonian of this problem? Because you are talking about the wave function. Wave function has no existence if you do not have a Hamiltonian. Okay? So there should not be any confusion about that kind of stuff. So let us see what is the Hamiltonian of this problem. Surbi or Adrija, any of you just say. What is the Hamiltonian of this problem? Without giving any specification to the two particles, mass, charge, energy, forget about this, just two particles. It can be two people, it can be two electrons, it can be two protons, neutrons, whichever, two leptons, two quarks, God knows anything. So two particle, right? So what can I say about the Hamiltonian of these two particle? H12, two particle. What can I say?
So the sum of the kinetic energies and the sum of the potential energies.
Sum of the kinetic energies, what sum?
The operators. Like,
No, there is some confusion here, Adrija. So that means you are saying that this Hamiltonian is actually sum, and this is what you are saying, Hamiltonian for the particle 1, Hamiltonian for the particle 2. I should write like this, or I should write in terms of the kinetic energy and potential energy that you are talking. There is a
no,
difference.
like what you wrote was,
What I wrote, but
yeah.
how about kinetic energy and potential energy definition of Hamiltonian? If I want to write that definition, I can use the Hamiltonian of the composite system as also as a kinetic energy and potential energy operators. Yes or
Yes,
no? Yes.
yes.
So let us see. So this is one definition you have agreed, but I wanted to write it like this. There is nothing wrong with this definition, right?
No,
But do you
I
think
think.
that? But do you suppose they are all valid definitions of the Hamiltonian, right?
Yeah.
But can you tell me, is there any flaw in any of these equations? Or can I accept both of them, or they are both identical? What is
So
that? Look at this. Yes, below first term. First,
T, the T12 is like, are we considering it to be the sum of the kinetic energies of the two
I can
particles?
write that. Okay, that's fine. So I can write. You are saying that I can write T12 is equal to. So let us write T12 is equal to T1 plus T2. That is what you are saying, na?
Hmm.
Okay, ठीक है. Very good. What about V12?
That is also the sum.
So V12, what should I, so these are all operators, right? Okay.
Hmm.
So what should I write? V12 is equal to
V1 plus V2.
V1 plus V2, right? So if these two equations are correct, if these two equations are actually representing the system, then I have no problem to write this guy. Why? Because then my H1 plus H2, so T12 plus V12 is equal to what according to the definition that we have given? T1 plus T2 plus V1 plus V2, है ना?
Sir.
Yes or no?
Yes.
So then what can I write? But what is my H1? Of course, you have assumed that H1 is equal to T1 plus B1. This is what you have assumed, right? Right? This is what you have assumed. So I can write T1 plus B1 and T2 plus B2 is equal to H1 plus H2. So everything is all right in this world then.
Yes.
God is also happy and human beings are also happy. Right? But don't you see any flaw in this argument? Nobody can see any flaw in the argument? Suranjana writes something. The interaction term should be there. That's great. She has given you some point. How can you just, so one of the expressions is correct. You know, one of them is wrong. Which one is correct? Which one is wrong, Suranjana? Which one is correct? Which one is wrong? Out of these two expressions, one of them is correct, one of them is wrong. Can you tell me which one is correct, which one is wrong? Surbhi, you answered this question.
So the first one is wrong.
First one is wrong. You had 100% correct? You are confident?
Yes, sir.
Why you think it is wrong?
Because in that case, we won't have any interaction. The 1 and 2 particles will be having separate Hamiltonians.
But this one, we did not assume. We said that T12 and V12, right?
Yes, sir.
But in certain cases, this can lead to this.
Yes, sir, if they are not interacting.
So this is the argument, in all through this argument, which is written nicely, but there is a very, very big flaw. You have completely ignored the interaction between two particles, Adrija, and all of you. Right? So naturally, this definition is not the correct definition of the Hamiltonian, but this is. Is that correct? Is that understood? Adrija, you understand
Yes,
that?
sir. Yeah, yeah.
Now let us see. Now let us go to your question. So what you have said is that why the wave function is a sum, wave function is a product, not a sum. Now let us understand that question. Okay, this actually leads us to this. I thought you have read somewhere. I'm sure you have, all of you have read. There is something called independent particle picture. What is the meaning of this independent particle picture? Without writing this, without using these words, what we just wrote in this case is actually the definition of independent particle picture. It is, that means these two particle Hamiltonians can be written separate. That means if I now extend this to n particles, 1, 2, up to n, that means I have assumed that I can write this as a sum of I is equal to 1 to n hi. That's a very, very crude assumption, and it is precisely to avoid this flaw. You know, we have to study quantum mechanics. That is the full basis of your quantum mechanics, electronic structure theory that you are studying. And when you could do this, if you could do this, then there should not be any quantum mechanics. दुनिया में कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, तुम लोग का CH3130 फिर आएगा ही नहीं है सिलेबस में. Do you understand? So you understand that this guy is wrong. But this is in fact, if you have studied your Huckel's method, have you studied Huckel's theorem? Huckel's method? Anybody is familiar? Huckel's rule? Yes, sir. Okay. So you have actually said this is what is the brilliance of Huckel's method. Huckel said 40 years ago, let us assume that this Hamiltonian is all right. This Hamiltonian is all right, you know. But you see that this is only an approximation. That means you are completely ignoring the interaction between each of these interacting electrons. Now, what is the meaning to this? That means for the composite system, let us get into the question. So that means composite Hamiltonian is written as H1 plus H2 plus, let us H1 plus H2, only 2 is fine. But it doesn't matter, composite Hamiltonian and Schrodinger equation must be written into like this. E psi 1 2, right? I can give I. This must be the case for the composite Hamiltonian. So there should be EI, EI. Okay. Now, when we studied the perturbation problem where this product function came, we actually said that two electrons are actually represented by a Hamiltonian. Now, Adrija, coming to your question, H is equal to H0 plus H prime. And you will recall that your H0 was given by a Hamiltonian expression minus delta 1 square minus Z over R1. I am writing in the atomic units, okay? So I will ignore the H2M, but I will write the Z, right? And this is, you have also plus minus half delta 2 square minus Z over R2. This is what you have written for H0. So that is like your H1 plus H2. But this H prime, which is actually taking the interaction term, it was written as E square over, forget about E square, 1 over R12. So in the context where we have said the product function, a wave function is a product function, we had a Hamiltonian. Remember, I told you, first is the Hamiltonian, then in the wave function. So the Hamiltonian is possible to be written like this, H1 plus H2. And I told you under which circumstances that is possible. That is possible if there is no interaction between the two electrons. That means only the H0. So H12 I have written as H1 plus H2 plus an interaction term which is dependent on two electrons. You understand this equation? Advija, you understand this equation?
Yes, sir.
So now you see, I have very cleverly written H12 is equal to H12. So this I can write as, so this I will write H12 is equal to H012 plus H prime 12. No problem. But H prime is actually giving you H1 plus H2. This is what is my partitioning. So the interaction in the system is actually completely controlled by the H prime time. Now, to facilitate this Hamiltonian, the question is that which kind of wave function will satisfy this Hamiltonian? That is the question. So this is discussion for so much for the Hamiltonian. Now the question is that what kind of wave function will actually let you write this Hamiltonian? If you work this out, now let us see very simple exercise. You do it little bit. H12 psi. So psi 12. Now you work it out in your own. Is equal to some epsilon. I don't want to worry too much about this. Now I give you this. H12 is equal to F11 F1 and G1. Two functions. G2. Now you do this substitution to this equation, both sides, psi. Okay? And you take another case where your F12 is equal to F1 plus G2 as you have wanted. As you wanted. Right? You understand my point? The two exercises I want you to do.
Yes,
Psi
yes.
1 is a product function and psi 1 is a sum function, or for that matter you can take a subtraction function. It doesn't matter, anything but the product, right?
Hmm.
And you will see that your Schrodinger equation would not be satisfied by this equation. You would not be able to write the Schrodinger equation of the composite system in this form. Very simple, you can do this. देखो h psi 1 is equal to say h f1 plus, maybe I should write it a few lines for you. Now h, so h1 and plus h2, nobody can take that claim. There is no debate about that, right? Adrija?
Yes, yes, yes.
So now I write f1 for your, the product
Hmm.
function we have done so many times, it will work. Let us see how
Yeah.
this guy is failing. I write this function. ठीक है?
Hmm.
What happens to this? You tell me. H1 F1, you will get something. H1 F1 तुमको कुछ भी मिलेगा. मान लो you will get something like say epsilon 1 F1. ठीक है?
Hmm.
And then H1 F1 H1 G2 plus H1 G2. ठीक है? Then what you will get? H2 F1 and H2 G2. You see that you are never going to get the original function back. You are not going to get the function F1 plus G2 back after working this out. But if you work it here, well, you will get simply, because when you will operate H1 F1 G2, what will happen is that your G2 will remain silent. Your 1 will operate only on F1 and you will get E1 F1. So the product remains intact. You see that? Similarly, if you work it out H2 F1 G2, what happens is that your F1 remains silent, H2 operate on G2. So eventually you will get a E2. And you see that this is your psi is back. So you are satisfying an eigenvalue equation. Is that clear? घर में थोड़ा लिख के करोगे तो और भी क्लियर हो जाएगा if it is not clear as yet. You understand? Hello? What happened? Adrija, कहाँ गए हो? She has left. Okay. So everybody understand? अरे बाबा yes no कुछ बोलो. Okay, so you see, it's a very simple thing to realize that when you have the two particles or many electrons, that is the first step of electronic structure of many electron systems, that if you can write your Hamiltonian as a sum of independent particles, then your wave function will be a product of the independent function. And just doing this exercise, you can see that your total energy will be E1 plus E2. Eventually, H psi is equal to, H psi 1, 2, you should be able to write at E1 plus E2 F1 G2. And that is what is your E1 plus E2 psi. You have gotten psi back. If you write your wave function as a sum of the two functions, you will not be able to satisfy the Schrodinger equation. It will not satisfy an eigenvalue equation. I hope you understand that. Okay. Okay. Anything else? I think this was a good enough, understanding for you also to go to the many electron problem, which we are now trying to enter. So I think our first thing for the, so far we have been concerned with the one electron problems, or one particle problems. We have not said much about the real many electron problem. Okay? So now onwards, our focus will be on that, the many electron problem. And the only point when we have discussed the many electron case is actually by this exercise of variational perturbation theory for the ground state of helium. Right? That's an approximation. We did not solve any Schrodinger equation. Remember, in the variational problem of helium or perturbation problem of helium, we never solved the Schrodinger equation. We just used an indirect route to get an estimate of the energy. Right? So that is not the way to deal with that is certainly not the general way to treat many electron problems. Adrija, you are back. So you got the answer, I hope. समझ आया?
Sorry, sir, but actually, what happened is my net connection got completely lost, so I did not understand anything in the end.
Oh my
I'll
God.
watch the video.
Just work it out, okay? Just what I say,
Yeah.
just watch the video. So just, okay, in two sentences, what we can say is that you just do this exercise. Psi12 is equal to F11, F22, or Fg. Let us put two functions, F1G2, and in another case, you take, as you proposed, F1 plus G2, okay? You just do this exercise. And for the composite system, which I am writing here, psi12 is equal to epsilon. What will be the epsilon? That you will find out, psi12. You just understand, you just convince yourself by writing these few lines that this guy, this is the way, this guy, this wave function will satisfy this equation with an energy epsilon 1 plus epsilon 2. But this guy will not satisfy this Schrodinger equation. आप समझ आया basic बात? You prove this, but you can understand what I'm saying, right?
Yes, that much I understood.
So if you do, okay, if you understand that much, then how do you say that I can take a sum? Your composite wave function must be satisfying the Hamiltonian Schrodinger equation, right?
Yeah.
It is not satisfying an eigenvalue equation.
Hmm.
So you cannot write it.
Yeah, I heard up till that much when you were explaining.
So you, but you got it, but you work it out.
Yeah, that one I have to do.
Yes, you do that. Then you will make it clear that when it is possible and why it is not possible. And for that matter, any other sign here will not give you. Plus sign will not work, minus sign will not work, and divide sign will also will not work. It is only the product which will work.
Okay.
Because none of these combinations will satisfy the Schrodinger equation. Okay? Okay. So let us now go to what we came to this point. So this is our introduction to many electron problems. Okay. So you must be wondering, the semester to आधा होने लग, semester तो खत्म होने लगा, अभी many electron कैसे चलेगा? ठीक है ना? So this is our So what we can do is that we can actually explain, we can actually discuss what is the problem. आंसर बाद में आएगा, पहले प्रॉब्लम क्या है वो देखते हैं. ठीक है? Like this question, I hope the other people who are in the class, you understood that why we have to do this, because you can never write the real problem like this. Real problem Hamiltonian can never be written like this. This is a very, very crude approximation. It was 50 years ago, it was like this. So in physics, they call it tight binding approximation. In chemistry, they call it Huckel's theorem. In mathematics, they call it graph theory. You know, they are all the equivalent. So Huckel was smart enough to use the concepts of graph theory into chemistry because Huckel's theory is very interesting. Though it just comes to my mind because when you have so many things like this, then he realized that the mathematical definition of graph could be used in the chemical problems. But of course, there will be some underlying mathematics which is not very difficult, but in a very simple way, Huckel was able to use that. And it was a very interesting idea, and it also worked for a long time. It still is used for many purposes in chemistry, as you know. But with time, we have realized that even though it is a very elegant and beautiful method, the idea is very simple, attractive, but it has enormous amount of flaws. But the ingenuity of Huckel was to realize that for many problems, especially the so-called aromatic compounds, aromaticity is a big thing in chemistry, and for those kind of systems, it can give you a very good pointer. The first definition answers can be very interesting. Okay, so but remember that Huckel's method actually used this Hamiltonian. So that is why there is something called a Huckel Hamiltonian. Okay. So, but we have to discuss in general what is the problem. Things have moved in 50 years a lot, So, and none of the results of Huckel's method can be used in any meaningful calculation today. Okay? It's just a beautiful idea, that's all. So, what is the problem? The problem is how to deal. The perturbation theory, we have actually worked more than one electron problem. 2 electrons ke liye, helium ke liye, we have given you exercise how to use the variational theorem, how to use the perturbation theorem. But that's an indirect way. You have estimated energies, but we have never tackled the real many electron problem solution. That means, let us write it. What is the many electron problem? Many electron problem is actually the solution of this equation. Let us write it in its full glory. So here you have a Hamiltonian of n particles. Let us not worry about electrons. Anybody in this world is a part of this game. So you have n particles, and you have a Schrodinger equation which needs to be solved, right? And then E psi. This is the real many particle problem. It can be for electron, it can be for proton, it can be for photons, it can be for human beings, it can be for rhinos, okay, it can be for planets. So, what are the difficulties? So, a Hamiltonian is like this. As I told you, this Hamiltonian in general you cannot write like this. So, I will write summation I. So that means you cannot just make a sum of individual Hamiltonian of each particle, which can be written as one particle functions, and just sum up. If that was the case, then there would have been no quantum mechanics, and that was actually the premise of classical mechanics. Not classical mechanics even, but 50 years ago it was 50 or maybe 60, 70 years ago. People thought it like that. But then we saw that lot of interesting aspects in spectroscopy, magnetism, electronic properties, everything happens because of the interaction, right? And so this is simply not working. So I do need to write an interacting Hamiltonian. There will be like when I wrote this little expression, H12 is equal to, remember this expression is fine, but H1 plus H2 is not fine. Why? Yes, T1 plus T2, you can write T1 plus T2. That is all right. But this cannot be written as V1 plus V2. That is the big problem. This is not possible. This guy is okay. You can write. But this guy is not okay. Because there is something called V12, V prime 12, which needs to be understood. That is where everything fails. Okay? So before we go to the electronic systems, we also have to generalize the problem for a collection of indistinguishable particles. So you can see that the problem is actually a problem of collection of collection of indistinguishable particles. That means we have an ensemble of particles which are interacting with each other. Okay? So what it means? So we need to derive the general the principles and general restrictions in the, I am sure when you have come to this class, you must have read what is the meaning of a well-behaved wave function. Everybody knows what is the well-behaved wave function. You have studied what kind of conditions must be satisfied by a wave function. But wait a second, you are going to see that there are some more conditions that a wave function must satisfy, which you are going to find out. The story is not clean. The story is not done. Okay. Before we do that, let us discuss a little bit about something called spin. Why? Remember, we have to discuss a little bit about spin, then we can discuss the collection of particles. So what is the spin of a particle? Why it came? So spin is an intrinsic property of a particle, right? And when the Bohr's model came, there was no spin. Remember, if you remember your Bohr's quantum mechanics, so it said something, these two forces will balance, planetary motion, etc., etc. But so the energy of the hydrogen atom was all right. But the problem started when the fine structure came. That means you have your orbits and you could actually resolve them into further pieces. That means you can further break those levels into other components. Then you got certain very strange features in spectroscopy. And after a lot of discussion, it was understood that there is something called spin in the system which needs to be accounted for. So by the relativistic field theorem, the Pauli said there is a spin, right? So spin is a very big thing, but for our purposes, we will use spin as what? So spin is an intrinsic angular momentum. For that, lot of people, you have said that spin means it is a up spin and down spin. So we are going to understand what is the meaning of up spin and down spin. What is the meaning? Because what is the meaning of up spin and down spin? Let us see, because we have been using this term for a long time. Let us see if you know it. Who can answer? Who can impress the class? What is the meaning of up spin and down spin? Say suppose in the electron. Now let us say suppose in the electron. Mona Lisa, can you answer? What is the meaning of up spin and down spin? Let us see. Okay. Suranjana, can you bolo Mona Lisa bolo? Do not be afraid to open your mouth now. You know, if you do not do it now, then you will have to open your mouth when you become a teacher. You know, it is better that you open your mouth now. Nothing to be, you know. So what is the meaning of up spin and down spin, Mona Lisa? Okay, somebody write. The value of MS quantum number is half and minus half. Very good. So, but that's a very high level answer for me, you know. Can you write it in small, one step below answer? We'll go there. Okay. Bolo? Somebody wants to say something? No? Okay. So, you know, first of all, you realize that it is not only up and down spin in this world. ये सब myth सबसे पहले खत्म करो. So it is not only up and down spin which is there in the world. In the world there are many other spins. Okay, so for a lot of people, especially chemistry students, in the after passing out, even they just think that electron is moving up, so we call it up spin, and electron is going down, we call it down spin, or something like this kind of, clockwise or anti-clockwise, whichever way. But the thing is that none of these have any physical reality to the electronic motion. Spin is not something that you can associate with your classical thinking, right? So it is not that electron is going up and that is why you have up spin, or electron is going down and you have down spin, or right side, left side. None of these makes any sense. So there is no physical reality to the spin. Okay, that is the first thing. Having said that, that means there may be some particles for which you can have something very different than this so-called up and down spin. So up and down is a complete misnomer. It's just we have two things, we thought it is up and down, plus minus. But it is neither plus minus, it is neither up down, it is not left right. But the thing is that two things is very easy to connect with this kind of analogies. But when you have three spins, what are you going to call it? We have many things in this world where you have more than two spins. Uska kya bologe? You understand? So there are many nuclei where you have spin. There are many things where you have more than or less than even that spin. So this half and minus half business needs to be understood. Okay. Okay. So now let us see, when you have studied, the spin actually came as a natural conclusion of the nature. What it means is that, remember when we studied, we actually derived this equation, J square, remember, and I think I must have told you some things like that. When you studied the general angular momentum of the addition of angular momentum, we saw that J square and mj, remember what is J square and mj? J square was actually, J was representing an operator, angular momentum operator, which is a composite of L and S. Remember we said that? What it means is that J could have been L1 plus S1, J could have been L1 plus S2, J could have been L2 plus S1, and J could have been L2 plus S2. Right? That means any two angular momentum, either L1, J could have been L1 plus L2 as well. J could have been S1 plus S2 as well. All this. Remember, it was such a general thing. So this is what J was representing. And this J came with eigenvalue equation. J is equal to J plus 1 H cross square, right? And Mj came as Mj into H cross. I think there should be a 2 pi, I guess. Is there a 2 pi, if you remember? L into, what is that? Okay, admit. So J into J plus 1 H cross square twice pi maybe. Yeah, there should be a 2 pi. Anybody remembers? What about the equation for L? L square is equal to L into L plus 1 H cross square by 2s pi, right? Should be, is there a 2 pi in the denominator? Huh? Nobody remembers if there is a 2 pi? I cannot remember. Okay, so, but the important problem is here. J into J plus 1, Mj into H cross. So what is, this is the J square and Jj. Okay, Mj. So I got two quantum numbers. One is J, and one is mj. Mj is very easy because once you have j, mj comes from minus j to plus j, just like your ml and ms. There is no confusion with that. But the whole confusion is with j, right? You remember, in that time, at that time, we actually said that j can take all these values. On top of that, it could also take half integral values. Mathematically, j could take all the values which I have written, dot, 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 dot. Right? So that actually led us to, sorry, let us keep this equation there. So that actually led to the discussion that whatever quantum numbers that we have seen, if orbital angular momentum is the only angular momentum in a system, we have also said that orbital angular momentum, which j could be a part of L and S, right? And but this guy can only take 0, 1, 2. There is no question about that. But then how can j take these values? If this is only 0, 1, 2, and if I just take j is equal to L and L, so suppose I will add lot of L1, L2 to get a j. But still there is no way that a j can take the half integral values. If I just add this guy for each of these electrons, I will still get more integers. But how do I get the half integral values? You understand? So, is that clear? So, then there was lot of speculation, lot of discussion, lot of experiment, and then it was understood that there must be something else in the system which is contributing to the half integral values of j, right? And then it comes that it was proved that in fact there is something hidden, and that hidden was this s, which actually accounts for these half integral values. Because if you have one integral which is L was known to us all the time. But if there is an S which can, or something which can contributes to the, which can mathematically take these half integral values, then if I combine them, I can come up with both integral and half integral values. So there was the first suspicion of the something called spin. That hidden variable was called spin, right? So that is how the j, that is how s was questioned. Now that we know there is an s, what is the operator? What kind of equations they satisfy? What are their matrix representations? What kind of eigenfunctions and eigenvalues they have? And of course, at the end of the most beloved important question, what are spin up and spin down in little bit more detail than what Adrija has written, that has to be understood. So, spin is represented by operators. What are those operators? Somebody can write in the chat box. So, this is a recapitulation knowledge, whatever, I do not know where you have studied, but you must have studied somewhere, because you cannot come it in the third year without not knowing anything. That is not possible. So what are those operators? You write in the chat box. S square, Sx, Sy, Sd. Very good. So the first thing to realize is that the algebra, spin algebra, is completely parallel to your L algebra. That means angular momentum. Orbital angular momentum algebra jo hai, spin ka algebra is a carbon copy. So if you have understood the ladder operator procedures in the L, you can just simply replace L by S. But the conclusions, the physical conclusions, are very significant and profound. That is where we should focus, okay? But the first thing is that just like the operators in L, you will also have so it's like a parallel economy in certain countries, in a wrong sense. So L square, Lx, Ly jaise hai, you will have S square, Sx, Sy, Sg. What does it mean? L square, Lx, Ly, Lg represent linear Hermitian operators. Right? Similarly, S square, Sx, Sy, Sg also represent linear harmonic oscillator. Linear Hermitian operators. Without asking any question, you assume that. You can prove that later. Okay. Second thing is that orbital angular momentum when you have written, I think we should take a 5 minutes break. My throat is drying up. I have to take some water. Okay. So we'll meet in 3-4 minutes back. Okay. So just, I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay. So yeah, so S square, Sx, Sy, Sg operators. Now let us see, we have, say for example, when you have a function, you have seen that the eigenfunctions of L square and Lg operator, simultaneous eigenfunctions, are called what? Those eigenfunctions of L square and Lg operator? What are they called? Who can say? Suranjana, can you say? Hmm? Okay. Tahiti, can you say? Spherical harmonics. Ashish answers. Okay, very good. That's right. Y, L, ML, theta phi. Now, I can also ask, there is an eigenfunction of S square and S6, Sy of Sg operators. Sorry, Sg operators. Remember when I wrote L square, Lx, Ly, Lg, similarly, and when I wrote S square, so that means it is understood that the commutation relations between these operators exactly are untouched. That means they will be satisfied as in the L case. So that means S square, Sx, Sy, Sg will be 0, etc. and Sx, Sy will be IH cross Sj, etc., etc. That is understood. So if that is the case, that means then I can say that just like I have an eigenfunction which is common to L square and Lg operator, I also have an eigenfunction which is common to S square and Sg operator. That's a very simple conclusion which I can draw, right? So my question too is that what is that eigenfunction? Do you know? Anybody knows? Okay. If you do not know, let me ask you this question. When I have a function of spatial coordinates, say function psi of coordinates, when we wrote electron 1, 2, 3, etc., we actually meant this, the position vectors, right? So spin also has coordinates. So, and a particle has, when you say a particle has spin, that means a particle has spin coordinates, right? So just like your R1 vector, you can decompose into R theta phi if you are using spherical coordinates, or you can write x1, y1, z1 in the Cartesian coordinates. I can also have the spin coordinates of each particle. So each particle has a space coordinate and a spin coordinate. That's the first thing to understand. Okay? Spin coordinate and space coordinate. Okay? So, but just like I have written, what should I write for the spin coordinate? Can somebody answer? I have dodged the question of function to the coordinates. Remember, I asked you to write the function which is an eigenfunction of Sg, S square and Sg operator. So you could not answer. Then I said that what is the spin coordinate? That's how I have taken you here. So very fundamental question. So what is the meaning of spin coordinates? That is what I'm asking. Anybody can answer? Okay. So we'll see that. Before we do that, so every answer is actually coming from the operator algebra. So let us begin S square. S square is the spin function. We actually never write a function. First of all, we never write a spin function like the way we write for the spatial function, means the coordinates, position coordinates. We do not write like that. but we know that there is an existence of such functions. Okay? So, but we see that what we do is this. The eigenvalues of S operator, eigenvalue of S operator should be given by S into S plus S1 H cross S square. Right? So, S square, if you otherwise you have to give root over S into S plus 1 H cross S square. Similarly, the component spin operator will come with eigenvalue MS H cross. Okay? Still, there is no particle, there is no electron specification or anything like that. Now, so these are very general equations for every particle. Now what happens is that we come to the electronic systems. When you see that electrons are spin half particle, what is the meaning of that? So there are particles which can have electron integral spin, half integral spins. There are particles which can also have zero spin, right? So the electrons belong to that category of spin half particle. That means my S, small s is half. This small s is not ever negative. It is only the spin, the s, small s quantum number. So small s is a quantum number which can take the half integral values, just like your L into L plus 1 H cross S square. Right? So in this case, small s for an electron can take half value. It is not minus half, it is only half. Right? So if your small s is half, right, there can be other particles, there can be other nuclei where your small s is something else than half. But for all electrons in this world, your small s is half. There is nothing to be. So if your small s is half, what is my ms? Ms is now minus s to plus s, just like your L, minus ml to plus L, or minus ms to plus s, or minus mj to plus j, including 0. Right? But there are twice s plus 1 values of ms. That also you have said. Twice n plus 1 values of ms. Right? So my small s is half. I have twice s plus 1, that means 2 into 2 plus 1, that means 2 values of ms. One such value is minus s and another value is plus s. That gives me 2 values of ms, which is minus half and plus half. So I have identified the s and ms quantum numbers plus, and s is half. This is my understanding of the spin for the electronic systems. One electron. If I have more than one electrons, I have learned how to add them together. I'll use the rule. Okay, but this is for one electron. Right. So s square and sg has a common eigenfunction. There is nothing to be doubted about this. What is that? So s square and sg has an eigenfunction, right? So I can write s square, an eigenfunction of alpha. So this up and down spin is actually two states which are represented by this. So this is a spin eigenkette. Everything else remaining same, I have an eigenkette which is represented by two quantum numbers, just like your NLM in the hydrogen. I can just assign proper values of NLML to get the orbitals, right? But as you know that this spin orbit, there is something called spin. So what will happen to the orbital, that we will discuss later. But at this point, let us understand the meaning of this. Just like an kette was defined by identified by 3 quantum numbers, you can have a spin eigenfunction which can be represented by two quantum numbers because S square commutes with Sg. So you can have S square to be observed and one of its components, not all the components, which we have conveniently taken as Ms. That means an eigenfunction of the Sg operator, right? So the common eigenfunction of S square and Sg is represented by this function. This is equivalent to your LML, which you have given the symbol YLML. Right? Except the fact that you could write a proper operator for this function. You could write the differential because YLML is nothing but YLML theta phi. There is a differential equation for which you could write this. But the thing is that everything is ghostly. Here I do not write anything beyond this point. So that gives me the question, what is my spin eigenfunction? वो किसका function है? YLML तो है, operator तो है, but these are eigenfunctions of theta and phi. Okay, I understand. But what are these functions function for? किसका function है? Can you say? That means when I have a function, suppose I have two functions, f star g, okay, and you have said that f g are orthogonal, right? What it means? You have said f if I now say that it is the function of coordinates, you can do this, right? Now, I also said that there is an equivalent spin function, right? That spin function I want to give a name called chi. Is a function. पहले तो function को define करो. किसका function है? Whose function is this? Can somebody tell me? Here I wrote R, right? Now, what is inside? That means if I have to write fg as spin function, so I can write spin coordinates. But what do I give as spin coordinate? That is what I am asking. Let me see if somebody knows this. Manish, anybody knows? Ashish? MS, Suranjana says yes, very good. So this is actually the mystery. So this is your MS, not S. So there are too many symbols, never confuse that. S, SG, S, MS. Your MS for every single electron is only half. It is the MS which is actually staying the spin coordinate. So spin coordinate is actually your MS. Very good. So now I can write MS. Right? But there is a problem. There is a problem everywhere. Your R could take, remember if you wrote R took how many values? Infinite values it could take, depending on as many as you want. But number of MS values is fixed in this world. You have only two values of MS if I am talking about the electrons. So, and what are those? Those are called MS is equal to plus half and MS is equal to minus half. So that means this function, this Fg is equal to Fr, Gr, Dr, right? What should I do with this function now? If I have to write an orthogonality for the spin functions, spin eigenfunctions are also going to be just like your orbital eigenfunctions, they will also be orthogonal to each other. And they will also be normalized. So how do I express the normalization function, normalization condition for two spin functions, which are called F and G? Can somebody tell me? What do I do? How should I modify that expression? F or G or D or?
Sir, by using the summation symbol.
By using the summation symbol. Very good. What do I write? Can you just tell me exactly? Very good. Summation. What should I write here?
Sir, it should be summation of chi function, then chi star
Mhm.
spin function.
But that is
M.
function. So I say let us call fg, right? I am writing in terms of f.
Okay.
F star.
So
What should I give
F
here?
star. Uh, sir,
Yeah, it should be
inside
summation.
it would be MS.
Inside?
Inside the thing, it should be MS.
Inside something which is a spin coordinate, right? You want to
Yes,
say
sir.
that?
Yes, sir.
So that
Something
spin
which is
coordinate,
spin.
I will write as sigma, right? And that sigma takes minus ms to plus ms. So if my ms is half, it takes minus half to plus half. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Right? So you see that, so this is a discrete sum. This was a continuous integration. But here you have only two functions, two things to do. One is for sigma is equal to plus half ms value, and sigma is equal to minus half. So if you do that, that should be 0 for an two spin eigenfunctions which are orthogonal to each other. That is how the equation should be understood for spin, right? Because spin is a discrete quantity. Your space was a continuous quantity. Your space was represented by continuous variables. Your spin is represented by discrete variables. Okay? So spin functions. Similarly, I can express to say that f star f is equal to 1. That is my normalization condition for the f spin function. Is that clear? So that means, let me go back to the very basics. So that means when you studied the hydrogen atom problem, you wrote the Hamiltonian. You wrote the Hamiltonian, right? Hamiltonian did not have any spin. You never wrote about spin in the Hamiltonian, right? You wrote only minus half grad 1 square, everything about position. And you solved that equation to get the orbitals. What were those orbitals? Psi, n, l, ml. That means whatever functions, big functions, that means I can write in terms of the r, nl, y, l, ml. This much you did, r, y, l, ml, theta, phi. But the problem is that that is not enough. That is not enough. But there is no spin in the Hamiltonian. So where is the spin coming into picture? Spin is coming into the picture by understanding that your wave function is a product of the spatial function and the spin function. So the definition of orbitals which I have described or which you have learned is not yet complete. There has to be a spin component of the orbital which needs to be understood. So that means there is a function so that these orbitals, this is a spatial orbital, right, needs to be multiplied by a spin function. I call this chi sigma, right? And so this function, where I multiply this by this, then it becomes a total orbital. So that then I have n, l, ml, ms. What it means, and I give the capital X. Capital X means is a composite for space and spin together. It is very, very important to understand your Pauli exclusion principle to understand this guy. We are going to do this Pauli exclusion principle, but I hope that you will understand these basic stuffs very clearly. So my orbital now is going to be a product function of the space which you have already derived for the hydrogen atom and a spin function, right? The spin functions kahan se aayenge? Spin functions just like your product, just like these functions, just like orbital angular momentum, these are eigenfunction of L square and Lg operators. Your spin functions are eigenfunction of S square and Sg operator. Right? So that is how you get 4 quantum numbers, N, L, Ml, Ms. Why there is no distinction for L and S? That is obvious, because for each electron your S is same. There is nothing to be different for each other, right? That is why they are not there. And these are the 4 quantum numbers which actually show up in your Pauli exclusion principle. So if I write the orbit, when you said that your orbitals are orthogonal, what it means? When you said that 1s orbital is orthogonal to 2s, you have written 1s, 2s, for example, or for that matter, any orbital. So what did you do? You said that psi 1s star or psi 2s star, psi 2s r. Or let us first understand the normalization, 1s, 1s. Okay? You said this. अभी तक ये definition ठीक था, right? But now that you have spin, and without spin there is no periodic table. Without spin there will be no physics chemistry, as you will see. Maybe you already see if you do not. So this also requires to be that then I must chi sigma star chi, if I have given 1s, chi 1s sigma. So this is what is the full normalization requirement of the orbital. So that means I have a spin function, so I have a spatial function which is to be integrated in the whole space, which will give me, and I have a spin function which will also needs to be summed with the 2 ms values, that in total will give me the 1. That is how the normalization and orthogonal. Similarly, orthonormalization should also be meaning what? Either this can, but orthogonalization is very interesting. You see that you can have one of them to be 0. Either this guy can become 0 to make the product 0, or this guy can make it make it 0 to make the whole thing 0. There are 2 ways it can happen, and that is why you are going to see what is the statement of Pauli exclusion principle. So my wave function now, when I write the Schrodinger equation, my wave function is to be understood. Now onwards, the wave function. So when I write the Schrodinger equation for the hydrogen, you should now understand my wave function has both space and spin. Okay, so that means I can write phi r into chi sigma. That means, so this is what is called, this is what is called a spatial orbital or simple orbital. तुम लोग अभी जिसको बोले हो spatial orbital or spin orbital, I do not know. You might have meant spatial orbital so far, but this is a spatial orbital. This guy is a spin orbital, right? Joint RS sigma, which we will write as chi x. This x is used for the joint space spin coordinates. This is very, very important because every single discussion you have to include both space and spin in the discussion. Okay. So the last thing that we'll do today is to understand what is the implication of spin in the hydrogen atom problem, which was already solved. If that means every single equation that you have gotten in the hydrogen problem, hydrogen atom problem, is equally applicable for this. Why? Because just like today, your Hamiltonian did not have spin. You wrote Hamiltonian, but this psi, you are saying that this psi is a product of phi r into chi sigma is equal to epsilon I phi r chi sigma, right? Okay, so now you see this phi r chi sigma is what? This phi r is what you have given the orbitals. That means the psi nl ml, psi nl ml r theta phi. And you have found out the energies of this system to be minus 1 over 2 n square in the atomic unit, or more precisely minus z square over y 2 n square. Right? So, what is the impact of spin? You see that because the Hamiltonian doesn't have any spin, this equation h phi psi, h phi chi can be written as chi sigma into h phi, because there is no spin in the Hamiltonian. So this function can be written as just outside the equation. Is that clear? So you can do this in both sides. So the effect of spin, what is the effect of spin? You can see that this equation is actually governing your energy. So that energy will remain intact in the hydrogen atom problem. Then what is the so big fuss about spin? The fuss about spin is that for more electron systems you will understand more, but for hydrogen even, what it happens is that the states that you have written, you know, it's a very poor drawing, sorry. So this, you know, it will be like this kind of stuff, and then there will be continuum. So each of these states actually will have two spin functions. That means whatever orbital I said phi psi 1s, psi 1s is now psi 1s x is equal to, means r theta and spin is psi 1s r sigma ms, which is half, or I can write s ms, and there is another function which also gives me same energy. So I can write s and ms now differently, half plus half and half minus half. So this is this half plus half kate is called your alpha omega, and this half minus half is called your beta function. So this is your so-called up function, this is your so-called down function, right? So the function which you had 1s orbital now has space part of both the orbitals same, but there are two spin functions which are different from each other. One of them is the up function, which is represented by sms, with ms is equal to plus up, and another is, so this, now I write this as alpha omega, I write this as beta omega. So that means this one, energy of both this function is a complete spin orbital, this function is a complete spin orbital too. So initially whom I was telling orbital 1 has now become 2 orbitals. This one has become spin, this has now to be understood as spin orbital 1. So I call this composite a spin orbital 1, and this one is spin orbital 2. As far as their energies are concerned, these two guys will have the same energy, minus 1 over 2 n square. But there is a degeneracy of 2. So if I take 2p, which was having 3 p electrons, px, py, pz, but just like this guy, px also will have 2 more states like this for alpha and beta, 2px, 2py, 2pz. What is there? 2px, 2py, 2pz means 3 spatial orbitals which are degenerate, giving each other. But after the inclusion, this becomes now 2px, 2py, 2pz. That means I have 6 states now. which will produce the same energy. So that is why, that means I have a 2px alpha beta, 2py alpha beta, and 2pz alpha beta, and that is how it will continue for all others. So that means the energy level diagram will be now doubled, and that is what happens when you go to the Stark and Zeeman effect. When we resolve the spin into more higher precisions, means more accurate spectroscopy with higher resolution, etc., fine structure, we will see that the transitions can take place from two states, not from just one. So that is why there will be more line in the spectrum. So that is the contribution of spin as far as the hydrogen atom concerns. So energy remains untouched as it was given by Bohr. That is why it has taken more time to understand the spin, because your energy was completely remaining unchanged. But the number of lines in the spectrum became more. And that can happen if your states are resolved into more states because of the spin, which is the case. The number of spins, number of states is now doubled. Right? So that is the implication of the spin in the one electron problem, hydrogen atom. Right? So now we have to really discuss. So I think let us summarize. So for each electron, you have an S square Sg operator. Okay? The common eigenfunction that we are going to discuss a little bit more, but we have said that there are two spin functions. One of them is alpha, one of them is beta. How to represent a general spin function? That will do it in the next class. So now what will be the operators for spin square and S square, Sx, Sy? Their matrix we have to discuss in the next class. Okay? But we have understood that an eigenvalue equation for spin also has to be satisfied, and these are complete. So if I have more than 3 electrons, sorry, more than, if my spin is, says S is equal to 1, how many ms values I have? I have 3 ms values, minus 1, 0, plus 1. So you have some nuclei where you have your S is equal to 1. You can have carbon 13 NMR, you can have phosphorus 15, sorry, nitrogen 15 NMR. These are happening because of the existence of the nuclear spin, right? And they are not half, okay? Now, it is only the electrons which has half spin. But you can see that if I have an S, but these matrices, alpha, beta, sorry, S square, Sx, Sy, Sg, these will be represented by what should be the order of matrices? What should be the general state of a spin? So if I have only two spin state, half and minus half, half, half as a kid, half, minus half as a kid. And this I have represented alpha, this I have represented beta. So my general spin state should be represented as A alpha plus B beta. I can represent, there are just like a two-level problem. You see that? So I need to find out what should be the matrix representation of S square, Sx, Sy, Sg. I will do that in the next class, but just tell me what should be the size of these matrices. I expect this answer from the class. What should be the size of these matrices? Who can answer? Manish? What should be the size of these matrices? No? Nobody can answer? That's very strange. अरे बाबा तुम्हारा स्टेट कितना है? How many states we have? Mona Lisa, how many states we have? For the electron, how many states we have? Spin states? Who can say? Suranjana? 2, of course 2. We have only 2 states, right? Yes, Tahiti 2. So all these matrices will be 2 by 2 because you have only 2 states, right? So we'll do it in the next class. Okay, tomorrow we'll do that. If there is any question, we'll take it. Otherwise, we'll just Any question, comments, or anything?
Sir, is the test confirmed?
Test, yes, test will be, you have said na 19th or, I mean, next, right?
Yes, sir.
Next Thursday, yes, we'll do it.
Okay, sir.
Okay. See you
So
then.
what would be the format?
Format, I think I will give you one or two problems I have not decided, but it should be something like an open book question, you can take whatever. So I'll supply the question before the exam. You can take 1 hour to submit, to send them by email. That should be fine. All right.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So see you then tomorrow.
Sir,
Okay, go ahead.
sir.
Hello?
So I had this doubt. So can we say that one is alpha is one electron orbital and one is beta is one electron orbital? Can we say like that?
One is alpha. Okay, let us see. One is alpha. One is with an alpha spin and one is with a beta spin, right? This is what you are saying?
Yeah. So they both are one electron orbital.
That is what is the complete definition of orbital. Yes. One is
And then we can
alpha.
say that one is completely a two electron orbital. Like
One
this
is,
was the doubt from the beginning of my, that when we say that orbital is one electron wave function, then how can we say that one is two? So now it is clear that as one is alpha is one electron orbital and one is beta is one electron orbital and completely
exactly.
one is.
When you say one is, okay, I think that is what a lot of people confuse, and maybe whom you are talking, they are not mentioning it properly. So when you say on orbital, it is actually one is alpha as the complete orbital, which can take only one electron. One is beta also can take one electron. But if you just say one is orbital takes two electrons, because that is only the spatial part you have said. You have not specified their spin parts.
Yes, sir.
Clear?
Yes, sir. Now it's clear.
So by orbital, but when somebody says orbital, he or she is actually meaning a spin orbital, including the space and spin coordinates. Otherwise, an orbital cannot be an one electron function. Just like you see, 1s2 में 2 इलेक्ट्रॉन है तो कैसे 1 इलेक्ट्रॉन फंक्शन है?
Yes, sir.
Similarly for the 2p6 and 3d10, etc., etc. That's right.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay.